Hi doll faces, I can't believe this is actually the penultimate Self-Love September 2017 video. Actually the very last one goes up this Friday. So at the time of filming this, it is Wednesday the 27th of September 2017, and this is the 12th video tackling the 12th theme that I thought would be really good to address on the channel for this year's work. So I really hope you've been enjoying the resources. I hope you've been getting something from the videos. Hopefully I've touched on a few things that were valuable to you in your journey. I felt like I cast the net pretty wide, and I really enjoyed exploring the topics for myself and thinking about how I respond to them, how I relate to them. So it's been an awesome journey. I've really enjoyed myself, and I want to thank you for just the awesome feedback and the awesome response. It's always really satisfying to make videos and have people say that they were helpful, that they made people think in a different way. That's always really meaningful to me. That shows me that I'm on the right track and I'm doing what I set out to do. A lot of people find it extremely difficult to be self-loving when it comes to their work, their employment, whether they work for somebody else in a big company, whether they have to get up and go to an office, whether they're self-employed, whether they're location dependent or not. It's really difficult for a lot of people to practice self-love and make self-loving decisions in relation to work. There are people who overwork. There are people who remain in really hideous employment situations for months or even years because they're not convinced they deserve more. There are people who keep fostering the same crappy habits when it comes to work and then getting themselves into the same binds over and over again and not feeling like they can understand how to release themselves from it. So there's loads of different factors, lots of different experiences. I want to hit on just a few insights that I think could be helpful if you're finding that self-love is a difficult practice to carry out in the workplace or in relation to your feelings and decisions around work. The very first thing that I really want to get out, that I think is so important, that I've said before and I'll say it again, is what is your routine like before your work day begins? What are you doing before your commute to work, or before you open up your laptop, before you meet with clients, whatever it is, whatever kind of work you do? What are you doing beforehand? Do you have a morning routine? Do you have a routine that looks a little bit like a window of time for you? Whether that means that you get time to shower and get ready in a way which feels comfortable for you, where you can choose what you're going to wear or how you're going to do your hair, or just make sure that you've got everything in your bag for the day, where you're not rushing to get out of the door, where you're not leaving yourself zero time. Do you have enough time in the morning to do your physical self-care, your hygiene routine, so you feel good and ready for the day, so you feel refreshed and ready to get out of the door? Is there time for you to connect with yourself before you actually go to work? This is a really important question for you to ask yourself, and if you can see any contrast between what your work day tends to be like when you don't have that self-connection time beforehand versus what your work day looks like when you do have that self-connection time, you can actually really look at the evidence of how vital it is to having a good shift, having a good day at work. It can really be so helpful to have a look at what kinds of influences you are imbibing, what kind of material are you putting into your brain box before you go to work. So if you drive to work, what are you listening to? Are you listening to the radio? Are you listening to a playlist? Are you listening to a podcast or an audiobook? If you take public transportation, are you reading a book or are you just scrolling on your phone? Think about what might be the best kind of thing to imbibe. What might be the best kind of little morning assault course to put your brain on before you get into the work environment? What do you want to feed your mind before you go into work? Do you want to relax yourself? Do you want to feel sharp and ready to face the day? Do you want to feel like you've listened to some really motivational music and you feel like you're going to go in there and you're just going to smash it and you're going to make it work for you? How do you want to actually orchestrate a situation where you begin work at the strongest possible point, where you're feeling inspired and you're feeling switched on and you're feeling excited and you're high vibe? When I realised that I could kind of orchestrate the material that I was imbibing before I went into a workplace situation, it really changed the game for me, because I realised that if I wasn't in a good headspace before work, and if I hadn't given my mind anything cool to focus on or chew over, if I hadn't fed my mind anything and given myself a chance to start the working day at the strongest possible point, then it was likely that I was going to walk in with kind of a challenged attitude already and with a feeling of incapability already, or maybe something would already kind of be niggling away at me and I'd be like, oh, this is really annoying, you know, as soon as I walk through the door into the workplace. So I realised that the materials that I choose to imbibe have a massive impact on how the day actually ends up going. And so I used to really focus on what kind of music I was listening to, whether or not I could listen to anything that was educational. I remember listening to some really awesome podcasts about Jung once on my walk to work, the last time I worked in an office, and that was really awesome, just basically filling my head full of ideas from Jung and learning and really kind of developing myself on the way to work. And that made me feel like I was ready to start the working day. That made me feel like I'd already engaged my brain and I'd already got something from the day before I'd even entered the workplace. And I didn't feel robbed. I think that's one of the things that really helped me about understanding that I could choose the materials that I wanted to introduce my brain to on a daily basis, if you like, and I could choose the way I spent my time before my working shift. So I basically realised that if I didn't spend my time wisely and I didn't put good stuff into my brain box before work, I definitely felt robbed when I sat down at my desk. I definitely felt robbed when I clocked in the morning. I felt like, you know, I just felt like I hadn't had anything for me yet. I felt like I was just getting ready to give my labour and my focus and my time and attention to this company and what this company's needs are, but I hadn't really had any time to think about my needs or focus on me. So I think what was going on for me was that I just felt a bit robbed. And when I gave myself the time to have an experience before work, rather than just rushing around like a headless fucking chicken and not really having any time to imbibe anything cool or have any time to connect with myself, it definitely made a difference doing that. It definitely made a strong impact on me. So I definitely consider thinking about how you spend your time before you step into work mode. What are you doing with that time? Are you wasting that time? Are you making crappy choices with that time so that when it is time to start work, you feel robbed, you feel irritated, you feel like you're already at a low point before the shift has even really started? It's really about being honest with yourself about the extent to which you set yourself up to have a good day or a not so good day. And so many of those choices belong to you. So many of those fucking choices belong to you. It's very important that you remain aware of that and you remain aware of your power to change things before your shift, you know, alter the way that you're spending your time so that you feel like you got something out of it and so that you feel that it actually contributed to the overall sense of starting work in a good place, you know, beginning with a good healthy attitude. It might also really help you to think about how much you let other people dictate the quality of your working day. Do you tend to let other people's attitudes and other people's energies bring you down? Do you have a sense that you are a little bit like the sails of a ship where wherever the strongest wind is blowing, you're kind of going in that direction? It's like other people have the energetic upper hand in the workplace and you tend to be pissed off if they're pissed off. You tend to be impatient if they're impatient. Do you notice that you can stay strong in your mentality and your outlook and the way that you want to approach work? Or do you notice actually conversely that you're very affected by the way that other people are behaving and you tend to almost take on their energies or start to mimic their responses to things? There are a lot of people that come into work with a really crappy attitude. There are going to be people that you meet along the way. Even if you're self-employed and you work from home and you work on your own, you're going to have to interact with people. You're going to have to interact with clients. You're going to have to interact with co-workers, you know, with other professionals, etc. Nobody can do their job entirely on their own. We need to reach out to people, even if it's only to check on an order or something like that. You do need to interact with other human beings. And if you find that you can be very persuaded energetically by somebody else's vibes, then that might be a really important thing to look at. You need to be able to stay strong in your vibration and set your vibration, as it were. I'm going to leave a video link down below to something that I made about setting your vibration, choosing your intentions for the day, just basically setting your mood so that you don't end up straying off track because other people are being really short-tempered or bringing a really negative vibe into the equation. It's about recognizing that you get to set your mood before you've even spoken to anybody else, and that gives you the maximum chance of actually maintaining that mood throughout the day and sticking with your outlook, making sure that you're not pushed off course by other people's attitudes or behaviours. I would definitely recommend thinking about shielding and protection, that kind of work that you can do in the morning before you've opened up your laptop or before you've left the house to go to your job. Really thinking about shielding yourself from anything yucky going on outside of you. It's really about exhibiting the power to put your aura on lock, essentially. And for a lot of people, a little bit of shielding in the morning, a little bit of that protection work, even if it's just saying a few words of power before you leave the door. So literally as you're stood at the door, just basically imagine yourself enveloped in white light or just pass your hand up and down yourself, say a few words of power as if to say, I'm focused on me, I'm focused on my outlook and how I want to behave. I'm not going to let other people's behaviours affect the way that I behave, and I'm definitely not going to take on anybody else's crappy energies today. This is about me being centred in the way that I want to behave and being true to myself. Sometimes we just need that little psycho-spiritual reminder, we need that little energetic adjustment before we leave the place, and that definitely can give you as well the maximum opportunity to shine on your own terms instead of being swayed by other people's behaviours. One thing that I've recommended to a lot of people that I think is a very self-loving idea is to make sure that you've always got some personal goals as well as goals that are set up for you by your company. So obviously if you work for yourself and you're self-employed, then all of your goals in a way, in a sense, are going to be personal goals. You might have some goals, some career goals that are directed by the market that you're in, the kind of industry that you're a part of, and that's fine. So those goals are kind of dictated by the industry rather than necessarily dictated by you on a deeply personal level. For example, you might want to get yourself up to the amount that other people in your industry seem to be earning, or that kind of thing. So it's kind of a market-led goal, but it's still really important for you to have your own personal goals as well, and that's mostly what solopreneurial people kind of have, obviously, because we set the parameters for our own businesses. But for most people, when they're doing their work, their goals are goals that are set for them by their manager. Their goals are usually goals that are set by the company. They are expectations and standards which are given from an external source and kind of directed to you. So it's also really important for you to think about some personal goals that you have that you can also reach, because the personal goals that you put into practice are always going to feel more meaningful and hold more weight, and they're always going to be a bit more exciting for you in a lot of ways than the goals that are directed towards you by your company or given to you by your manager. So try thinking about the way that you actually want to kind of conduct yourself in the workplace. What do you want to push for? What's the next plateau for you in terms of success? How can you prove something to yourself or challenge yourself and have that be your own exciting personal goal that you are going to play with and you're going to work towards? A lot of my goals when I worked in offices were actually about the way that I conducted myself. They were goals that were to do with keeping things high vibe all day, staying as focused as I could, making sure that I took all of my lunch break and I did something productive with my lunch break, making sure that I ate nicely and didn't eat snacks that were going to make me feel sluggish and shitty in the afternoon, not drinking too many of the premium chocolate coffees from the machine. You know, all of these were little goals that I had that I knew were going to help me to have a better day at work and that I knew I could work towards on my own terms. It wasn't a company directed thing. It was my own personal goals of how I wanted to use the day. One of my goals was to read at lunchtime. That was one of my goals for a long time, was actually just to take myself off and instead of just spending the hour chatting with work colleagues, to actually go away and read and really kind of dive into my education and the self-study I was putting myself through. And other things were to do with, you know, healthy eating, packing a lunch the night before, making sure that I was hitting my personal target in terms of numbers, as well as focusing on the company directed target. So I had things like that that just made it easier for me and more interesting for me, where I could set up my own challenges. You know, I set up my own pins and tried to kind of knock them down. So this made the work situation more interesting for me, more exciting for me, and also kind of helped me to cultivate that bond with myself, where it wasn't just about what the company wanted from me, but also what I was wanting from myself. So I definitely recommend setting up some personal goals. If you find that the goals that you're aiming towards at work are goals that are given to you by your manager or goals that you decide upon as a team, also think about some personal goals that you want to hit. And it doesn't necessarily have to be to do with results or numbers or anything that can be quantifiable business-wise. It can just be you know, ambitions and goals that are to do with the way you feel and the way that you carry yourself, the way that you conduct yourself around people, the way that you choose to take a certain mentality into work with you. Those can be goals. Those can definitely be work-related goals that can work for you, where you can really see the payoff and the return on your investment there. There is huge power in talismans and amulets and signs, little things that you can take around in the workplace with you or have with you while you're doing your work. work that can just inspire you. So you might want to select an image of something that you're working towards and saving for. So you can have like a photo of a really lovely holiday destination if you're saving for a holiday, and that can remind you of the greater purpose of doing work in the world and thinking about what you're saving for and how that's going to have a direct positive impact on your personal life. A lot of people have photos of their family around at work. They like to really check in with that lovely emotional response that they get when they look at pictures of their family, and that's a really nice way to kind of propel the work day forward. You can use crystals. Loads of people use crystals. Loads of people that are on a woo-woo path take crystals into the workplace with them, or have crystals around them while they're working from home, or whatever the case may be. So find your talismans, find your sacred amulets, find things that are going to really tune you into either the greater purpose for doing work or into the highest version of yourself that you can really kick into action when you're at work. Take your breaks. Don't be a fucking hero. Take your breaks. This is really important. There's so many people that are actually not taking breaks, that are working through their lunches, etc. And if you are working for a company or for an employer who doesn't let you have your breaks and is really shady about things like that, that's something that does need to be addressed. Everybody needs a little stopping point. Everybody requires that moment for rejuvenation and to catch their breath and to make sure that they're actually feeling okay for the next part of the shift. So if you know that you work really long hours and you're actually in a situation where you're not allowed to take your entire break, you might want to actually go through certain channels to alert certain people to that, or get something changed. And if you can't get something changed and you do feel that taking your breaks is important, and that it's important that your employer shows you the respect that is due you by allowing you to have your breaks, then essentially you might need to decide whether or not it's time to start looking for a different job. You know, for a lot of people, that is how it ends up being, that if they don't have access to their breaks, and if they do not work for an employer who honours the importance of giving their employees breaks, it does come to that point where somebody thinks, why would I work in an establishment like this? But normally there are channels that you can take. You know, you go through human resources, or I don't know if that's what they call it in America, but over here we call it HR, and you kind of go to them and you raise a flag, you raise a kind of alert, if you like, and say, look, this isn't happening, we're not being encouraged to take our breaks, or we're being told to come back early from breaks, and you take it from there, and you actually kind of have to alert people, because that's the kind of thing that can get really serious, and it can also really dampen your spirits when you are at work. If you don't get your break, if you don't get your time to peacefully eat your lunch and just check in with you and have that downtime, then yeah, it can definitely affect your mood at work, and it can affect your ability to do your work productively. So definitely take your breaks, and if you know that you're being a hero and you're working through your breaks, you may need to assess whether or not your workload is too much and have a discussion with the powers that be about that. Or it could be the case that you're working through your breaks because you're kind of telling yourself that the way that you perform at work, or the way that you overperform in this case, is a direct symbol of your worth at work. So it's almost like you're working for your sense of worth. And you know what? You don't need to do that. You need to take a break. You've been at work for over a certain amount of hours. You are entitled to a break. So really think about why you might be working through your breaks if that's the case. Just a heads up, I never used to do that. I was not about that fucking life. I was not someone that would work through my breaks. I had a lot of issues with self-love in my past and a lot of things I had to work through, but working through a break was not one of them. Thank you very much. I'm taking my breaks. Know your rights at work and exercise them when necessary. Recognise that you do have workers' rights and you are entitled to exercise them. So really get to know what those rights are. I think that's a really important part of the self-loving journey as an employee on any level. It might be a good idea to consider what you are doing that is unhelpful, that is not contributing to your ability to have a productive work day. For example, are you staying up really late at night and not getting all of the sleep that you could be getting? Are your dietary choices not conducive to you being switched on and plugged in during the workday? Are you leaving yourself far too little time in the morning and ending up getting to work late, feeling flustered, feeling sweaty, and your boss being in a bad mood with you? These are choices that you make. This is accountability that you do need to take for yourself if you want your work situation to improve. So definitely spend some time to sit down and just figure out what might be going wrong, where you might need to tweak things and make improvements. Be honest with yourself about the bad behaviours that you're indulging in, the fake favours that you are not doing yourself when it comes to having a really good work day. Know that you can give it your all when you're at work and still hustle on the side. You can still study part-time while you're doing a full-time job, or you can, you know, make it half and half if that's an option for you, so that you're studying part-time and working part-time. Know that even if you've only got very limited time outside of work hours, you can structure your life so that that limited time is partly spent working towards your passion or working towards the career that you really desire. There are so many people that spend years of their lives putting their passion on hold because they convince themselves that they don't have time because they're working a full-time job. Meanwhile, other people are beavering away on the weekends or in the evenings, writing their novels at night time or setting up their businesses at night time. They're going that extra mile. They're snatching any little bit of time that they have to actually put towards their passion and build their kingdom aside from their work. Don't be one of those people who tells themselves that in a perfect world, if you didn't work full time, you could invest in your passions, you could spend more time doing what you love. Be one of those people who says, you know what, I've got 2 hours free on the weekend for it, I'm going to dedicate those 2 hours to it. You know, don't tell yourself that you need to wait until there's this perfect situation where you don't have to work full time, you do have the money to take 3 months off to invest in your passion. Don't do that. I couldn't do that. I had to set up my hustle while I was working a full-time job. I had to do all of my studying and get my qualification, etc., while I was working a full-time gig. So many people do that, and you can do that as well. That is possible. Think about whether or not you need a mindset shift to get you to that point where you see that that is possible. And also very much think about the way that you spend your time when you're not at work. Are you spending that time self-lovingly, genuinely? Are you actually putting it to good use, or is there some wastage there that you can really examine and you can say, hey, I don't want to waste this time. I want to spend this time working towards my passion. See your issues in the workplace as chances to prove yourself, to learn about yourself and to do better. I always used to do this whenever it came to dealing with difficult personalities in the workplace, like people that I clashed with, interactions that I found difficult. I would always see it as a chance to improve upon the way that I responded to that person the last time. I saw it as a chance to show myself the amount of discipline and the amount of restraint and the amount of self-control and self-mastery that I could have in a situation where really I might have wanted to just fucking hit the roof and behave in maybe what could be considered a very childish manner or a destructive manner. So wherever you're having issues at work, try to think of it as a chance for self-improvement and self-discovery. See it as a chance for you to keep trying to hit that mark and trying to do better and trying to figure out different ways of cultivating a positive attitude around that thing or changing the way that you behave around that thing. I think work can really be such a training ground for self-discovery and self-actualization and self-mastery, and we forget about that. We like to see work as being completely separate from our journey of personal development, but actually it's such a fucking training ground. There's so many lessons that you learn about yourself, and so much self-progression and inner work is done in the workplace. It's done while you're actually making a coin. So definitely think about that, consider how that could be relevant for you. Don't get bogged down in negativity, try very hard not to. For me, there came a certain point on my journey of working jobs where I realised that I could actually duck out of the negativity that was going on. I did not have to bitch and piss and moan about things whilst doing absolutely nothing to change them. I did not have to spend my lunchtimes potentially talking to employees who only wanted to bitch about the job and didn't really want to talk about anything else or didn't really want to find a solution. I realised that I didn't have to be involved in petty dramas and bullshit. I realised that I could bring the best version of myself to the workplace. If you know that you're bogging yourself down in negativity, know that you have a choice. Know that it doesn't have to go down like that. You don't have to address work problems that way. You don't have to live out your work day like that. So if you know that you are getting bogged down in negativity, you are getting dragged down a really unhelpful road that's leaving you feeling more drained and more crappy, just know that you can change that. You don't have to keep contributing to your own work-based pressure and work-based stress by allowing yourself to be shrouded in this negativity all the time. If other people want to continue to be in that negativity and be steeped in that negativity, that's up to them. But you've got to think about what's best for you. If you need to confront that right now, do so. It is a very self-loving thing to do so. And finally, my last little tip that I want to give you for self-love in the workplace is don't forget to connect your work to your spirituality. Like I said, work and the challenges that we go through at work can be really good opportunities for psycho-spiritual development. Don't tell yourself that your work is separate to your spiritual growth. There are opportunities for spiritual growth all the time when you're working. And also, if you're into magic, if you're into manifestation, if you're into ritual, if you're into tarot, use those things in relation to work. Don't tell yourself that you can't throw cards to figure out how to deal with a work-based problem. Don't tell yourself that you can't meditate to have a better relationship with work and a better relationship with your colleagues, and definitely do not tell yourself that you cannot cast spells for work-related shizzle. If you want to help yourself, if you want to get yourself out of a bind, don't be shy to cast for work-related stuff. So that's the final thing that I would say. I've got to go now because I've got a doctor's appointment. I hope that I wasn't speaking too terribly fast and that you didn't notice that I have somewhere to be. Darlings, I've loved delivering this resource to you. Thank you so much for being involved in Self-Love September. Don't forget the hashtags. If there are things that you want to say, stories that you want to offer, we can use the hashtags to find each other in the dark. So much love and self-love. Blessed be, darlings. Oh, I found an altar space. Just set up here.